Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. You're on the Bible Forum. This is Memorial Day weekend 2019. It may be a time of joy and revelry and picnics and all the rest, and I don't want to be a big downer here. But when we look at the world and the kinds of things that are starting to erupt, it pushed me this week to look at exactly when would this world end. In an earlier article, I mentioned global warming and the proponents that are touting this as something which will bring about a major catastrophe, even perhaps the destruction of life on this planet, at least as we know it. Well, aside from their fears and the science that goes with it, whether it's legitimate or not, and all of the other human aspects to this dynamic, there's still God. Asked in this context, the answer becomes the answer to when will this world end. It is when God has predetermined that it will. And it will not end before that. Now, that's not a real satisfying answer from our perspective, but it is the only answer. Science cannot tell you. The sociologists cannot tell you. They've been hollering doomsday for the last 100 years. We are well beyond where anybody thought we could be as a global entity. And we're still going forward. But God is the one true order or authority, controller of this world. And this God of ours is eternal, meaning that he dwells outside of time. He has no past, he has no future. There is only the eternal present tense. And things in this universe are moving and changing according to God's will, according to God's purposes, not ours. Now, the Bible is very careful to make sure that you know that none of this makes him responsible for sin, nor responsible for the ills of this world. God is controlling. And as he allows sin, as he allows the evil to squeeze out periodically, that's when we move closer to the end. Where God knows what that end is, but knowing is not the same as causing or doing it. He is guiding. He is not propelling. The trajectory was established in the Garden of Eden when Adam surrendered his will to that of the serpent, this manifestation of God's sworn enemy, Satan. Adam, a being created by God with an internal ability to decide, much the same as the angels, since an untold number of them apparently rebelled against God as well. Lucifer was once the highest created being in the universe, a being the Bible characterizes as the son of the morning, Isaiah 14:12, a being who dared to challenge the authority and the power of God, verse 13. Not with an army, but with a thought, a purpose. God says of him, "Thou hast said in thine heart, I will be like the Most High." Operating in the highest levels of the pantheon of God, this angel got to the place where he thought, I can do this. In verse 15, God reminds him that while you may have these ambitions, yet thou shalt be brought down to hell. to Hades, literally, the world of the dead, the sides of the pit, a cistern, a dungeon, a well. Lucifer's punishment is instructive. Since he would not yield to God, he was cast out of the familial presence of God. Cast out and yet permitted to challenge God. He was then permitted to continue to exist as an illustration of just what that means. And from this point, his name, his identifier, became Satan, literally the opponent. As a proper noun, he is known as the opponent of all that is good, of all that is right and holy. We think of Satan as the worst of the worst when it comes to death and destruction. And yet this is not unlike the human heart, which is set against God. In the Old Testament book of Job, God asks Satan, "What have you been doing?" That's my translation of Job 1, verse 7. And Satan's answer was, "Going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it." You see, here's a being very much engaged in the affairs of this earth. It is a statement of one who views himself in charge of this earth. He is walking up and down, inspecting his kingdom on a regular basis. And as the narrative continues, it becomes clear that he is calculating what's going on, even to who is on his side and who is not. He credits God's blessings upon Job for Job's loyalty to God. In verse 11, and I'm paraphrasing, he said to God about Job, "Take it away. Take away all of his blessings and see what he does." So God agrees. And herein is the setting for the entire book of Job. How will this lover of God respond if you take away all that he has, all that he holds dear, and ultimately you take away his health? God forbid Satan to take his life. Does a true believer in the one true God of heaven continue to honor and to serve and to love God in the face of this kind of turmoil? Or does he love, honor, and trust God because of what God has done for him or for her? Or does he do what's right and good and godly simply because he loves God more than he loves anything else? And of course, the answer in humanity is a little bit of both. We say, "Thank you so much for saving me from hell. Thank you for giving to me this new desire and the new blessings that flow from that. Let me demonstrate my love by living in harmony with your revealed word." And we say that in those moments when we are sincere and we are in harmony with God, and yet we still have our issues, and there are still times when we go the other way. The unbeliever is very much the opposite. The unbeliever is not aware of his sin. He's aware that he does things other people don't appreciate, but he doesn't call it sin. He doesn't see it as sin. He's not measuring himself against God. He's measuring himself against himself. He's not really aware of God's love. He doesn't know what that means. He's not caring about the condition of his own heart. He is satisfied with that heart. He is oblivious to any spiritual penalties he may be incurring, since he doesn't believe that this God is going to do this sort of thing anyway. If he does things that he believes to be good, he praises himself. If he does things that he believes is bad, he blames God. The awful, destructive, discouraging events of life are always called an act of God. And they are called that for a reason. That many of them are simply acts of nature built into the system by the corruption brought about as a result of human sin, Adam's sin, is ultimately ignored. That Adam's sin was the natural human response to the particular circumstance he found himself in. A response that any human being would have had is not factored in. The mess that is this world exists because of human sin, not because of holy anger. God is not causing all of this. It is a simple cause and effect dynamic created by the rebellious heart of mankind. For example, why was a Saudi citizen brutally murdered in Turkey a few months ago? The answer? Because of what he was printing about the Saudi leadership. We look at that and we say, sticks and stones. What difference does it make? People, it's like your friends aren't going to believe it, and your enemies won't believe anything else. But here is a pagan monarchy without biblical moral restrictions. The king, in this case the crown prince, said, since the king is 85 years old, has stepped down from day-to-day operations, is the law. He can do anything he chooses. And the world is rich with such absolute monarchs, whether they have a title or any property or not. The founders of these United States understood all of these things. They had been ruthlessly abused by such a monarchy for decades, hundreds of years. In thinking about what would be the best change, they arrived at the rule of law. They did this because they knew the heart of humankind, their heart and the heart of others, was desperately wicked and could not be trusted. They knew without adequate external control, the human heart would run amok. They knew that pride existed in every human heart. When human pride is mixed with opportunity, it is a dangerous brew. And human pride knows no bounds. Why? Because the natural human heart is morally corrupt. Not because of the things they've absorbed, but from birth. We come into the world with this. You ever watch a baby? You ever watch them when they really want something? Nothing will change until they get it. And if they could hold a gun in their hand, they would shoot you. The rage in that 2-year-old little heart can be very shocking. What we used to call parenting worked beautifully to modify, to mollify, to alter that natural condition and reaction. It was working to modify it in order to prepare that child for adulthood. When you grow up and you get outside of this family and you say these things to other people, they're going to hurt you. When you take these things that are not yours, you're going to go to jail. When you act out the way you act out at 2 years of age, you won't live very much longer. Today, the media is training our children while parents are fulfilling their own desires. The school system is training our children while parents are off working. The texts and the different online things that children can access is filling their hearts and their minds. And the results are in. You see it in the streets of major cities. You see it in the classrooms where teachers have no authority, very little control. You see it where students bring weapons to school and just start shooting anything that moves. And in politics, you see it where people are easily deceived, even to the point of violence. That's the human heart in its corrupted state. And it is this condition that pushes us inexorably toward a cataclysmic conclusion. We're seeing it in the political battles raging on the streets of America, where human beings throw themselves into a violent fray. Over what? Over what the future of this nation will look like. One group wants the freedom to live, to work in peace. The other wants a form of anarchy where every immoral, selfish tendency of mankind can find free and legal expression. The idiocy of that is seen in the transgender movement, that little boys think they can become girls, or that maybe they already are, and vice versa. And all of this regardless of the consequences, regardless of the ramifications, regardless of the implications. It is the tyranny of the 2-year-old being acted out by adults who seem to have education and understanding. I say that because much of this nonsense occurs on college campuses, halls of learning. It's in the want to of a society that has been permitted whatever would keep them quiet and satisfied. It's being led by men and women who care little or nothing for these pawns, only the power that they will bring to them. The power to alter our world systems and values to reflect a more godless society. Godless in the sense of unlimited moral opportunity. The question being, who says what's right? Who says what's wrong? And who can say any of that for me? Questions being answered by those who have no vested interest in the outcome. Young people, the deliberate poor, the political pawns, who just follow the herd, buy into whatever the culture is saying at the moment, and honestly believe that all of that chaos will end up bringing better, more good than did our founding fathers with Bible in hand. When will the world end? Nobody knows. But it will end in total chaos. It will end with the majority of people in this world, on this planet, rebelling against God in any form. The most to hand form will be Israel. But also Christians, and any who stand for God on any level. And they will have their way. And they will destroy every semblance of God on this planet unless God steps in to stop it, which he will. It's called the end of this age. And it's not that far off. It's never more than about 7 years away at any given point. That trumpet could blow right now, and the dead in Christ would rise. And those of us who are alive and are believers in the Lord Jesus Christ will disappear from this planet. And then all of these godless people will have the opportunity to do whatever they want to do. And the picture that God paints will be one of complete chaos and destruction, wherein if he does not step in, no flesh would survive. That's the human heart at work. And we're pushing ourselves toward oblivion. What about you? Are you sucked up in all of this? Or can you think for yourself?